Implemented on 1st of May 1990, the Certificate of Entitlement, better known as COE, was put in place to control the growing number of cars in Singapore. With the heights that the COE has reached, however, the effectiveness of the system has been placed in the limelight. Christopher, you wrote in a piece recently that there should be a thorough review of the system instead of just putting piecemeal measures, right? So what do you think is wrong with the system?
I think one of the main things that is wrong with the system is that the supply of COEs has been very uneven. So in some years you have 100 over 1,000 pieces of COEs, and that will bring prices down to as low as below 20,000 for a piece of COE. And then you have years like now where you have only about 20,000 pieces of COE a year, and that kind of shoots up, that kind of props up the prices to record levels. So you have this kind of unevenness. I don't think that is desirable.
What would be a better solution instead of what has already been proposed?
Ultimately, I think what we want to address is congestion, isn't it?
Yes.
And so, population control is one way of controlling congestion, of managing congestion. The other would be to have a more comprehensive usage-based kind of pricing. We have ERP, but perhaps the ERP as we have it so far is not sophisticated enough to influence the way we use our cars. So the government has talked about ERP2, which is a more sophisticated system which can charge according to your distance that you cover. I think if that ever comes about, that should control congestion in a more effective way. So right now, I think the measures that we have is more weighted on the purchase end rather than the usage end. So we need to shift some of that over to the usage end. Yeah, because if you have too much weighted on the purchase end, people pay so much for a car. Well, I mean, the result would be that they want to use it as much as possible.
So it doesn't matter how high the ERP is.
That's right.
If you were to know that there'll be higher ERPs, will that deter you from, say, buying a car?
I mean, for ERP, it will be more of per usage basis. I will definitely have to plan my travel to make sure that I can minimize my cost while doing my travel. But as Raymond said also, I have to get to my destination on time, and public transport definitely. If I consider that, it must also be efficient for me to get there.
Are there any things that the government needs to take note of when they come up with further measures?
I suppose you have to look at the whole situation. I mean, we in Singapore, we have the highest GDP in the world, and yet our car ownership is equivalent to some of the more the poorer countries. Is that the right kind of balance we should have, or should we allow people to own cars because that's a natural aspiration of wealth, of affluence, and then control the usage? I mean, I've always been stressing on that. In a lot of developed cities in the world, car ownership actually is quite high, but people take public transport and they use their cars quite judiciously because the cars are not so expensive, so the opportunity cost or the cost of not using it is actually quite low. So they can leave it at home and they take the train or the bus during peak hours and then maybe use the car at night or on weekends.
Before you want to control the usage, you have to make sure that the public transport is it's different. You see Hong Kong, they got very high population, but the thing is that there's not much because their public transport is very good. Yeah, you see everybody take their trains from one point to the other point. Only that maybe on short distance family use, then they will use cars. If not, they will use trains. Yeah.
That's all we have for today. Thank you, panelists, for participating in this episode of Point Blank. Watch our other clips for more on our discussions about car ownership in Singapore.